Well. It seems we might just be coming to the end of an era at long last, as just recently, it was reported that Disney's starting to second guess their approach with all of these live action remakes, with the Tangled remake officially being put on ice for the time being. I'll be honest, I'm both shocked and also not surprised in equal measure. The reality is that Snow White is doing badly at the box office. I think it's always been clear that whilst Disney would like these films to get a good critical response, that in the end, they don't mind if they're panned so long as they make money. However, this is not making any money at all. It had an absurdly high budget of $240 to $270 million, which is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. That's more than the budget for the first Avatar movie. Insanity! Of course, because of this inflated budget, it was obvious it needed to do well at the box office to counteract that. I've seen estimates saying that to be a success, it would need to have a lifetime gross of $500 million. I'd say it's unlikely it's going to get those numbers. So far, it's grossed $168 million as of writing this. It dropped into second place at the box office in its second weekend, which is very bad. And now with Minecraft out and blowing up, I'd be shocked if this thing's able to even limp close to the numbers it needs to get. On top of that, it's been largely panned by critics too, and has a lot of controversy surrounding it, which compounds the humiliation. From this perspective, I think I can see why they're willing to change things going forward. It's like when Walt Disney Animated Studios had multiple big-name box office flops back-to-back in Strange World and Wish, which caused a pivot in Moana from show to film, and then the decision to focus more on sequels for the rest of the 2020s to try to recover some money. When the money dries up, we see a shift in the creative mindset. It's a tale as old as time. That said, I'm also a bit shocked because it does feel like Disney's extremely stubborn when it comes to these sorts of things. I thought they'd need a bit more proof that it wasn't working. Then again, we have Lilo and Stitch on the horizon, and if that does well, I guess we'll see what they do. Either way, it's clear that Snow White is a disaster zone, and it's a crazy fall from grace for Disney live-action remakes. Like them or hate them, the reality is that they've been a dominant force at the box office for what's been a good 15 years. Remember back in the day when Tim Burton made Alice in Wonderland? That's the film that started it all, and caused so many more projects to become greenlit. It had a smaller budget than Snow White at $200 million and managed to gross about $1 billion, which made it a top 5 most lucrative film ever at the time of its release. It's clear the film was simply intended as a one-off for Tim Burton to do his thing and then dip, but its success meant that 4 years later, the true era of Disney remakes would begin. First off was Maleficent, which started very strong with a gross of $758 million. Cinderella came next with a decent $542 million, which, whilst lesser, also had a far lesser budget of merely $90 million, and so it ended up making bank. The Jungle Book grossed nearly $1 billion, which would set the stage for The Lion King. Alice Through the Looking Glass failed, but that movie was an abomination anyway, and was bookended by financial successes for Disney's other films, so it didn't have quite the same vibe as Snow White. Beauty and the Beast came next and grossed $1.2 billion. Clearly, it was all paying off for Disney. Huge success followed huge success followed huge success. This was the financial golden age for these things, where they were raking in the cash and the discontent hadn't quite settled in yet. Dumbo was bad and did badly. Christopher Robin was forgettable and was mostly forgotten at the box office because of it. From here on out, the complaints would get louder and louder, but the money was still pouring in. They also milked the hell out of them too. 2014 had 1 remake. 2015 had 1 remake. 2016 had 2 remakes. 2017 had 1 remake. 2018 had 1 remake. 2019 had 5 remakes. 5! At that point, you know you're taking the audience for a ride and pushing quantity over quality in search of big bucks. This, for me, is where the audience really started to sour on the live-action adaptations, and it never felt the same again. Regardless, Aladdin made a huge amount of money. Crossed $1 billion, and so did The Lion King. My god, The Lion King did well for itself, grossing close to $1.7 billion. The second Maleficent didn't do quite as well, and then for a few years, the films were really only being released on Disney+. Lady and the Tramp, Mulan, Cruella, Pinocchio, Peter Pan and Wendy, all available digitally. It wasn't until The Little Mermaid back in May of 2023 that we got a theatrical release for a Disney live action again. It grossed $569 million off of $240 million, which is good, I suppose. Then again, I did read somewhere that to break even, a film generally needs to gross something like 2.5 times its budget. Not sure that makes the distance for that film. Mufasa did far better than this, grossing $721 million, but for both of these, I can see the studio just being a bit underwhelmed. I feel the Renaissance era has been their golden goose for so long. They had Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King all posting billion-dollar figures within the span of 2 years. A high-profile movie like The Little Mermaid not getting close, that's kind of sad. And after a $1.6 billion film, I'm sure Disney were hoping for more from Mufasa despite it doing well. Then we have Snow White, which is just done badly. They made their grand return, and it doesn't feel the same as it was before. And whilst not terrible numbers, 1 out of 3 bombed, another was middling at best, and then the other was a success. It's not great odds. Hence, I guess, the news that Disney are going to be changing tack and taking a new creative direction, and part of that is the shelving of, for the time being, a potential Tangled remake. What is this new creative direction, though? Is it to dial back completely on these live-action adaptations? I think that remains to be seen. Let's not forget, I said earlier, Lilo and Stitch is set to release. If it does well, they might just chalk Snow White up to bad luck and return to full steam ahead again. Plus, there is Moana coming next year. That could also be a smash hit, considering Moana 2 just recently grossed over $1 billion and turned the ship around for Walt Disney Animated Studios. Hal, I'll be perfectly honest with you, I'm actually a little bit disappointed that of all the remakes getting shelved, it is Tangled getting openly cut. Lame. Do I accept the majority of Disney's live-action remakes these days have been mediocre to terrible for years now? Yes. However, I think the hate for Snow White is massively overblown to an insane degree. It was miles ahead of the likes of Pinocchio. Plus, I'm an unabashed Tangled fanboy, so even if the film sucked ass, I'd be more than willing to go and see it because at least it's some content for me. I still think they should make a sequel to the animated version since the studio is going full steam ahead on the sequels anyway. Just saying, I reckon it would do big business. People underestimate how popular and successful Tangled was when it came out. It really was the sign of the changing tide for Disney. It was their highest grossing film since The Lion King, which meant that when it released, it was the second highest grossing Disney film ever. Yeah, it would get outstripped during the revival era pretty quickly as billion-dollar box offices became commonplace amongst the animated studios, but I think if it was given a chance in today's market, a sequel would do money. Which is why I'm surprised that of all the films to be confirmed, it is Tangled getting the axe. Meanwhile, there's been no movement or news from Hercules or Robin Hood, Aristocats or Bambi. They're all still in development apparently. Can't see how any of these have a chance of being more successful than Tangled, but anything can happen, I suppose. Regardless, we still have 2 more coming, and we'll see if there's any future announcements from Disney. I think it's clear, though, that what they're doing isn't working like it was, and that something really does need to change. What can they do, though? Honestly, they need to go back to the drawing board and see what made the remakes interesting and popular with audiences to begin with. Maleficent, whilst not enjoyed by critics, managed to enjoy a more wide-reaching popularity with audiences. It took one of the old classic Disney stories, gave it a fresh perspective and a completely new coat of paint. It reframed the film from the perspective of the villain, and in the process, fleshed out character depth from many figures of the original film who had fallen by the wayside previously. The king, Maleficent herself, Aurora, the fairies, the prince to an extent. By doing so, they did something new with it. It doesn't just try to copy the original, but with better visuals. Cinderella's the same. It takes what was a fairly two-dimensional story and set of characters, and gives them life that we hadn't seen before. The stepmother, the prince, even Cinderella, all became more fleshed out as we saw their story develop. The Jungle Book was the apex of this era, a visual masterpiece that also saw further character progression and development across its narrative. However, over time, the film started to become more style over substance. They'd often follow a rehash of the old script and not do much different with the characters whilst providing incredible visuals, and they'd think that's enough. For a while, they were probably right. The box office proved that. Some would change the storylines a bit, some would alter the characters, but rarely would they bother to craft a compelling story. There are films from this era that I really like, but it was clear that the promise of big payouts had changed things. It's like when Marvel started really milking the universe post-Endgame. It started to feel more sloppy and less well crafted. Still some great work in there, but also more and more mediocrity hitting the screen. Ultimately, that's what we've seen in the last couple of films. The visuals are often stellar, but then they make a couple of questionable alterations to the story to fit a modern sensibility, and they call it a day. They don't dive in and flesh out the characters like they used to, and it just doesn't feel as special or well crafted in that way. It very much feels like a cash grab. They know that they can't release a film that looks bad or has bad music, etc. They want to cast good actors who will give good performances so people are going to come and see the movies, but they don't seem to care about the quality of the story and the script as much as they used to. Either that, or they're in the midst of a very, very heavy losing streak in terms of finding quality screenwriters for these films. So I think to turn the ship around and begin to release more well-received movies, perhaps they should take a break from the annual releases and take more time to craft a more well-rounded narrative that fills in the blanks from what we didn't get in the animated version, or takes the story in a completely new direction while still retaining the same overall plot and character. E.g. Maleficent or Cruella, that way of doing things. Those films are so good. My faith in Disney, it's currently not exactly high on this front, but at the same time, it never hurts to be optimistic. So we'll just have to wait and see. And so with all that being said, these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of the recent live action news? Do you think they can turn this ship around, or do you think they should simply scrap the whole lot for good? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.